Howdy doody, and welcome to The Good, the Bad, and the Worst, a podcast where we review movie trilogies and series in an attempt to discover which film is some duded up, egg-sucking gutter trash. I'm your host, Marvin, your cousin, Marvin Berry. And joining me today,
I'm Grana, and boys, my density has popped me to you.
And I'm Luke, and why don't we make like a tree and get out of here?
So good. Oh, that's right. It's finally time. It's Back to the Future time. Guys, we've done Lord of the Rings, we've done Alien and Terminator, and now it's time to reach 88 miles per hour with my ultimate trilogy, Back to the Future. How do we feel about these films?
I like these films are films I've never had any nostalgia for. I'm pretty sure before this viewing, I've only ever seen them on TV, so I'm watching them with ads, probably watching them while I'm doing other things. But I really really enjoy these movies. I 100% know why they're classics, and it was just a really good trilogy, and it's going to be another one of those trilogies where we're picking the least good of three really good films.
Definitely. Luke?
So, I have like a weird experience with these films. So, I watched them when I was a kid. I haven't watched them in probably 14, 15 years or so. I was very young when I watched them, and my whole like knowledge of these movies mostly comes from seeing them in memes again, and the hoverboard, like the hat, the jacket, the shoes. It's stuff I always wanted when I was a kid. Like I thought that was the coolest of cool, that outfit. I always wanted to be in that timeline. But yeah, I don't know. Just it's a weird trilogy. It's completely. I've always had this sort of thing in my head that it was generally accepted that one of these films is definitely the worst and one of them is definitely the best. And for me, that it was completely the opposite way around. So it was very interesting watching them again. I really appreciated most of them.
See, yeah, I get what you mean, but I never found, in my experience, it's always been out of the two sequels. There's always been one that people much prefer and one they don't care for. But there's never been a definitive take on that. I think I found a lot of people who actually would prefer three over two, and then there's a lot of people, like a very devout fan base, who think two is much better than three. So I am interested to know where you guys are going to go with this. Luke, on that point about the outfit from 2015, these are some of the most iconic films, I feel. Like what you say about knowing these films through pop culture. I was honestly wondering, is this the film that has the most iconography recognizable with it? Like the DeLorean, the hat, the crazy wild haired scientist. Like,
The hoverboards, the
the
shoes
pink
that do themselves
hoverboard,
up.
like
yeah,
it's stuff that you see on Facebook every year when it comes to a certain year. Obviously, we all forgot the memo to wear them outfits 6 years ago now, and it's weird to look at it as a
I
movie that's
wasn't.
now
I was doing that in
6 years in the
2015.
past. But yeah, it's something that's just always been there in pop culture, and it's you constantly see memes about it, you constantly hear references about it, always being quoted and everything like that. It's they're very they've lasted a long time.
I would say the only other movies on this level I think are Star Wars. Like everybody knows who Darth
Mm.
Vader is. Everybody knows what a lightsaber is. Everybody can quote "Luke, I'm your father." That they're the other movies I would say that have had this huge pop culture legacy.
Yeah, you're right. That probably would trump it a bit. But yeah, I mean, if, for that fact that this would be comparable to Star Wars, like the probably biggest franchise in the universe, is saying something for what was a film that should never have been, and by all intents and purposes shouldn't have even worked, but it did. Real quick question: where were you guys on Back to the Future Day? So October 21st, 2015. Do you remember or?
Was probably right here playing video games on my computer with my hands.
Um, that's about a month after Metal Gear Solid 5 came out, so I was probably still playing that game,
That
actually.
would have been too.
Yep.
Right on. Well, I remember it well. I finished my evening shift at the video store. I rented Back to the Future because I think my DVD was in storage. Got a train home, sat down, and I watched Back to the Future 2, and it was arguably the greatest night of my life. At least it's in the Mount Rushmore. It's in top four.
That's it was something I was going to say when you were saying about pop culture and everything. I'm pretty sure 99% of people that own DeLoreans are because of these movies. Like I don't these
Indubitably.
days, if anyone has a DeLorean, it's because of that movie and they're a diehard fan of that. And it gets people's attention. If you see a DeLorean, straight away you're like, that's the Back to the Future car.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. It's a Back to the Future car. No one cares or knows anything about it except for this film.
Yeah,
Yep.
one of my first notes was DeLoreans are only a thing because of these films.
Yep.
Yeah,
It's
and
only a thing
John,
that we talk about today because of these films.
and it's so funny because they were such a notoriously terrible car. They were made from really
Yeah,
crappy materials. John DeLorean, the creator, was a notorious like snake oil salesman. So he's like a huckster, and he's like not a good businessman. He's cheating people out. He makes this awful car, sells it just on the reputation, and then this film comes along and makes it seem like the coolest car in existence.
If you're gonna build a time machine into a car, why not do it with some style?
It's great. Like it should have been an abandoned thing that no one remembers, but it's forever, forever going to be part of like the pop culture zeitgeist.
do you guys feel like? And we talked about this once before on a podcast we never released, but I feel like these movies have had a really big impact on time travel in media as well. You guys agree?
Yep. Carl
Like,
So there,
Sagan, most famous physicist of all time, considered that number two the greatest time travel film that he ever saw for its handling
right.
of theoretical time travel.
There you go. Because there was a little post that floated around on r/cool guides this week. If anyone's been there, and it's about like these different timelines, and they talk about like a fixed timeline where things can't be changed. So that's kind of like Harry Potter 3 or Terminator, and then dynamic timeline, which is Back to the Future. And then there's like multiverse, which is it's become popular lately, like um,
mm.
Avengers and the later Terminator movies. But there's a big like red box on the dynamic timeline that says paradox, and that these movies, the way they present time travel, don't really work. Like
So,
Explain why.
if well, so let's just go with the first one because it's the biggest example of it. But if the problem is that Marty's parents aren't getting together, there's like that's a binary thing. They either get together or they don't. So how do his family members fade away? He either exists or he doesn't. His parents aren't half together and half not. Like
Luke, do you have a rebuttal?
no, time travel is confusing. So, like, my whole thing growing up, the Back to the Future way of telling time travel is how it was ingrained in my head. That was just always how time travel worked because it was basically the first example I saw of that. And so I kind of feel like Ant-Man in Avengers, where Tony Stark's like, please don't tell me you're basing everything on time travel on Back to the Future. And it is a bit like that. And I feel like it is the least scientific way to do time travel. But I can't really explain why because I haven't done much time travel myself, so I don't really know. But it like Grant said, it doesn't make much sense how they can be slowly fading away. Like, is it going to happen or like it's really if he changes that first event, then it's done for, isn't it? Like it
yeah,
doesn't matter if they hook up down the line, things change. Like the way, like the time they met, the date they met on, like when babies were conceived, everything would be different still. And obviously, stuff does happen differently. Like they're rich now and more confident because of him knocking out Biff and everything like that. But I don't know. It's a interesting can of worms.
I mean, yeah. So it's engaging with the fact that we have no idea what time travel would look like or how it would function in any way. Like,
but there are theories about it though. There are ways of thinking about it that do make sense. This is one
yep.
way that it doesn't make sense.
So I feel like, at least in the sake of the film, it's a real clear visual prompt to just be like, this is how time travel's affecting it by fading in and out. Does it also, because it goes from, because there's the future as well.
Did Looper use this same thing?
Yes, and so Looper is probably a more egregious example because you have the scene where he loses a leg in the past and then trips over in the future. So that still can cause a paradox very easily, which is what this guide was trying to get at. I guess my final point on this would be, even if it's not realistic, I think it's probably one of the more fun ways to look at time travel. Like it is a fun way to do a movie to have this visual prompt, like you say, of seeing people fading away to know whether
Hmm.
you're succeeding or failing.
Isn't more of the idea as well, if it could be a paradox, that would have already happened, and so we'd never actually see it because it's already essentially destroyed itself, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So by him going back to the past and doing it, we almost know that it's not a paradox because it's happening.
But that
It's-
gets into a
yeah.
fixed timeline theory where nothing can ever be changed. No matter what happens, things always
Mm.
happened, however, they happened when you went to the past.
Well,
Which isn't true because obviously they changed their
they change
personalities,
it.
didn't they?
Yeah.
Because in number two, they then they break it a bit as well. because he goes in and he's like, you can go back and create split off timelines. And in that there is a main timeline. Because that kind of introduces that idea. He's like, this is the main timeline. And if you go back, that's where the time's constantly sort of running like a river. And there's all these little offshoots that can come from there. And they just trip into one of these offshoots.
See, two really changes and becomes more of a multiverse theory of time travel. But in a multiverse theory of time travel, you would never have that photo fading in and out.
But a multiverse is also like they're all equally valid, right? Where it's like you split it off, and then if you go back to the past, that is then the past of that alternate universe. Whereas there's only a split, like Doc draws that diagram where there's only a split off from a certain point in history. So there's one main timeline, but there's like, I say multiverse because I don't know if it strictly is, but there's these new dimensions that split off from that.
Yeah. Back to the Future really it plays in both fields, I guess, of having a multiverse and a dynamic timeline. I guess the thing in a multiverse is you change the events, but you can never go back to where you came from. You can never go back to the timeline that you started in.
Yeah, I don't know. I find the multiverse theory on concept a bit like just kind of not a cop out, but it's kind of bland. Like you say, it's more interesting to make these ones.
Yeah, I agree. It's a lot less interesting. Like it's more fun to have a timeline where there could be a paradox and the universe is going to explode. Like they're fun stakes to have in a movie.
Because then I think as well you get like probably my other favorite time travel film, Donnie Darko, which has the same thing where it's a parallel universe that isn't an equal multiverse, so it self destructs. And so it's this interesting idea of like it's an offshoot of that main timeline. And I assume that Richard Kelly was very inspired by Back to the Future, as everybody has been, like you said, Luke.
Yeah.
And I find that's a really fascinating concept. Yeah, yeah. Like I think there's probably are a lot of plot holes in the first one with that. Yes.
Yeah, it does spoil the movie if you try to read into it too much. If you just look at it as this is a fun way to present time travel, it's a really good film. I just want to shout out Roswell and Enswell, the episode of Futurama where he becomes his own grandparent. That's also another excellent example of dynamic timelines.
True, because I don't think there's any outside of Primer and I don't know, maybe Time Crimes. I don't know if there's any real time travel film that is like holds up, right? I feel like everyone, even that tries to explain it, and even then, Primer's just kind of so lost in its own jargon that I don't know if it makes sense.
Yeah, like you're looking at the hands while there's sleight of hand happening under the table or something like that. Like it's a magic trick. They're not really
Yeah.
presenting to you the truth. Maybe I don't know.
So I think at least I came to a point long ago. If you're going to enjoy any film about time travel, you cannot you can't hope for like foolproof. You can't like you're going to find loopholes,
Yes.
and you just got to take that with it.
Yep.
Sweet. Time travel's great though. It's like the best trope ever.
It's fun.
Do you guys want some stats?
Yeah, always.
Stat
Always.
corner.
Stat corner, that's our new category. Back to the Future, 1985. IMDb, 8.5, Metascore of 87. Notice I'm not using Rotten Tomatoes because it sucks. $19 million budget made $222 million at its original release. Comes up to $388 million with all the future releases like on Back to the Future Day and stuff like that. That's a lot of money. Back to the Future 2, 1989. IMDb 7.8, Metascore 57. $40 million budget, made a total up to date of 332 million, so a bit less. Number 3, made a year later. IMDb 7.4, Metascore 55. $40 million budget as well. I think that was shared with number 2, so I don't really know how it splits up. But made $245 million there. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
It's incredibly that was incredibly successful, incredibly consistent, I guess is what I would say. Like they're not. I don't think they appear on any like these are the most money making movies of all time or anything like that. But I mean they're a good bet.
And it is interesting that like Back to the Future 1 got 96% on Rotten Tomatoes. Back to the Future Part 2 got 66% on Rotten Tomatoes. And Back to the Future Part 3 got 80% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Again, it might be the most least interesting thing you've ever said, I think.
Wow, that's
you have decreased the quality of this podcast for everyone. Thank you.
I apologize.
Yeah, I mean, like $388 million to a $19 million budget is pretty considerable. You're right; they're not going to make bajillions, but when you consider this, obviously becomes a video game, amusement park rides, spin-offs. It inspires everything. It's a stage play. Yeah.
Speaking of like its box office success and everything like that, do you think, as popular as it is in mainstream media, do you think it would, if there was like a reboot or a new one now, it would do that well, like a Star Wars or anything else? For some reason, I can't see it doing that.
Definitely wouldn't. There's numerous factors for that, but no, it wouldn't at all. I don't know, Grana, what are your thoughts?
I know, I agree. I don't think it would. A re-release, a remake wouldn't be. It just, I there's things about these movies, and one of the biggest things for me about these movies is the chemistry between Marty and Doc. Like, I,
Yep.
I don't know how you recreate that, honestly. Like, I think that was just lightning in a bottle.
Yeah,
What about a
And I just,
sequel? Christopher Lloyd's still great. He's
he is.
such a good actor. I saw him in something recently. I don't want to spoil what it was, but he's fantastic in it.
Oh, he's phenomenal. Like and that's what watching this again, I did realize that these guys are like, in my mind, they've always just been funny guys or decent characters, but they're actually all fantastic actors in this. Like, I don't think they get enough praise for how good their performances are. And to your point, like Christopher Lloyd and Michael J. Fox, I don't think we have anybody even close to him. Like his star power, but his accessibility being this like 5'5" dude, but just incredibly charming, kind of like ultra relatable, but also ultra cool. Like he rocks the jeans with the pockets inside out and the fluoro jacket, but it's also like this guy's a bit of a punce. Like I just don't think there's anybody like him
You get
current.
Christopher Lloyd and Zac Efron together. Magic.
Mm,
I'd watch it.
I think I think
Half
Christopher Lloyd
musical.
would die.
It's a real shame that Michael J. Fox is, he's got Parkinson's and
Mm.
obviously doesn't act so often anymore. And but even, I don't know if you guys saw that there's an episode of Scrubs that he cameos in,
Yeah,
and
That's
he's
the first
just
great.
thing I thought of then.
he's excellent in that. Like
Yeah.
he has the illness in the show, and they use it to really good effect. He's just so good in it, and it's just a shame that we didn't get more of him. Really.
Yeah, it really is. He could have had one of the biggest careers in Hollywood. It is one of those cases like what could have been. And you're right, everything he's in, he still brings it. Like he still pops up every now and then in episodes of things. And it's obviously that either they usually play to that strength. But yeah, he was such a superstar coming off like Family Ties. He was such a big thing. It's just crazy. But to your point, well, this getting remade, because that's kind of the debate that's always happened, right? Like when will Hollywood remake this? Because they've remade everything else from our
Mhm.
childhood.
And it's been a long time
It has. It's been
in
quite a
Hollywood,
while.
especially.
They had Back to the Future Day, so like people were keen and remembered it. But I think, especially with the first one, it's such a unique film that it could. Because if you're going to remake it, you would have to remake it with what, like 2012 or 2020 and 1990, right? Because it was 1985 and 1955 were the two timelines. And
Yeah.
the thing about that is there's such a distinctive difference between them. Like the 50s and the 80s feel like two entirely different worlds. But I think ever since like the 90s and the internet age, there's no real difference. Like the
I
90s and
think one set
2020,
in modern time in the 90s would be kind of fun, though.
but it would just be so like, yeah, this is a slightly older version of the same world. It wouldn't play to
Mm.
that strength of like, where am I alienation, like this family friendly, like bellhops at the gas stations pumping your gas and stuff. It's like, well, all it would be is just like everything's automated now. But oh, that's funny, I guess. I don't know. What do you
Yeah.
guys think a remake could work like in this time?
I mean, I definitely think the world has changed more than you're giving it credit for. Like, it comes up time and time again on this podcast, like, jokes made about homosexuality in movies in the 90s, you just wouldn't have them today. Like, you could maybe have an interesting story resolving around those sorts of issues that have changed so much since the 90s. And like technology and stuff, like it's similar stuff, but it's changed a lot. Like, I don't know. I don't think you're giving us enough credit for moving on from the 90s.
No,
And
I think
the music's sick in the 90s. Get some of that going back.
Creed. Get some
yeah,
Creed in there.
Creed would be number one on the soundtrack.
Yep. As soon as he
But
pulls in, just with arms wide open, just starts banging.
I think it would just be Nirvana over and over again.
Yeah, it would be.
Put in some Pearl Jam. It'd be a real grunge feel. But then even that, so he'd be going back to this grunge time of like disillusionment, and he'd be like, "Oh, this is a weird time." It'd be such a tonally different film because the 50s was such a like a cheery view on the future and like, look, America's great, we're doing okay. And so the real like going back to there from the 80s is kind of like feels weird to where America was in the 80s. Whereas like we're still riding that disillusionment train from the 90s. Like grunge never
Yeah.
left our hearts. We're all still disenfranchised and just like, what are we doing?
Yeah, you don't get that great scene at the end where he returns to the present and he's just excited about the hobo on the bench and the porno theater behind him. Like that town is a crap hole.
Oh, it's great. It's so funny. And it's such an interesting take on Reaganism, but I'm not getting into politics.
I mean, I'm pretty sure the future version of that town is pretty horrible, and he left his girlfriend sitting on that park bench for about 5 years. So, Jessica.
Yeah, it's Jennifer.
Jennifer, yeah, sorry.
The timeline debate becomes interesting. Like if they've just left her on there for days, or what that really looks like. I don't know. That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Does it deserve to be a trilogy then? Let's just figure that out right now.
I think it's, yeah, absolutely. Like the way they, obviously it all depends, as with all movies, the way they pull it off. But like it is one of the classic trilogies. Like you think of all the stuff like Lord of the Rings and Star Wars, Back to the Future is there. They do something different in each movie as well. Like it's not just like going back to the well again. It is something. Each movie feels distinctively different, and yeah, no, absolutely deserves to be a trilogy as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
Great.
and like you say, it's hard to argue with the results, I guess. Like I think maybe there's a world where maybe there's a timeline where these movies aren't as good. The second and third are really terrible.
Nice.
But yeah, excellent movies, absolute classics, and definitely deserves to be a trilogy.
Yeah, I don't see any sort of. I think it's one of those ones that it's definitely should stop at a trilogy. I don't think you can keep making films from this.
Sure.
Like
Yep.
I think it's just each film you make is going to get worse and worse. And like the I haven't seen it, but the animated series, from what I've gathered, is kind of like just this constant adventures. Like they go to the dinosaur era, they go to some other part of history, they do a wacky adventure, they have to get out of it. And I'm like, I don't know, that gets tiresome unless you go down the path of like Rick and Morty, which is just taking it to the bizarrest extremes.
Yeah.
But
I
trying
mean,
to
Rick
keep
and Morty is basically the cartoon version of these movies, isn't it?
I mean, that's what it's based on. Rick and Morty,
Is it
Doc and
really?
Marty.
I
Yeah.
didn't know. Yeah, true.
Yep.
the earliest inception of that was literally called Doc and Marty, and it was like this crude
Oh.
animation thing. So it's,
Well, that's great. I
Yeah.
had no idea.
I think that's probably the best way to do it, because if you any more films, I think this would be weird. But but like I say, it's a weird thing you can keep dipping into for other stuff. Like I don't know, they made a musical about this in 2020. How weird is that? I wouldn't have pegged this for a musical film, but
I mean, surely it's just retelling number one though. It's not a new story, whole cloth.
well, look, I'm not a big musical fan, but as far as I know, they usually do a decent amount of like appropriation of stuff, and they do tweak it.
Yep.
And the reviews I read were like it was really good. So generally, I don't think it would just be like frame for frame and just add in some songs. But
No,
anyway.
no, but
No, they probably didn't bring in the cultural appropriation.
Anyway, Dennis Franz, who is he in Back to the Future?
he's the teacher, the recurring
Strickland.
teacher.
Yeah, I had
Turns
that
up with a shotgun in the second one.
Strickland.
Yeah, no, I'd have to agree with that. Pretty much nailed it. So
I've got to say, is he in the third one? I can't even remember, but
He's got
is
a
he the guy
small.
that's going to hang
Yeah,
him or whatever? Yeah.
Yeah, he's the sheriff. Oh no, he's the Marshal Strickland, and he has a bit more of a role in a deleted scene. But we will come to that. Boy, will we come to that. I also think he could be.
I didn't even put it together that he was the marshal. That's great.
He says Marshal Strickland.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, there's just
I'm bad at names.
that
guys
mustache
were like-
and that cowboy hat completely fooled
Yeah,
me.
number 3's got some phenomenal disguise work. Like Thomas F. Wilson's almost unrecognizable. I also think he would work as Red, the mayor, and the bum. Because did you
Yeah.
guys did
Yeah,
you
I
know
can
that
see
the bum is the mayor from the 50s?
Oh, true.
I only just picked that up this rewatch, and I've seen this film dozens
wow.
of times.
Wow.
Luke, you didn't know. Don't act like you knew.
I said, "Wow."
Oh, I thought you were.
I didn't know.
I thought you were trying to. I thought you were berating me.
No.
Oh, that's good. I should have. Sorry, I should have given you more respect.
Thank you.
All right, it's the hardest time of the night. The wooden spoon. What do we have to do it just for the sake of posterity? Luke, you look like you got a hot take.
I don't think this is hard at all. This is
Who are you?
So, okay, let's get into it. So, for the last 15 years of my life, I've always had the belief that this movie is the best one and widely known as the best one. Watching them again, it was very clear to me that it was the worst one. And so that is definitely Back to the Future 2, in my opinion.
So you
I'm
thought that?
curious where you ever got that was the best one from.
Yeah, me too.
So I think here's the thing. I genuinely thought that when I would go onto Rotten Tomatoes, that would be the highest reviewed one. I
There's your
thought
problem.
everyone thought that this one was the best one, and I think it's because it's the one I remembered most from my childhood. It's the one I see the most memes of. Like we've said, the shoes, the hat, the hoverboard. Like when I think of Back to the Future, I think of number 2 most. That's the
Mm.
first thing that comes to my head is watching number 2. And I just have, and because I haven't watched it since I was a kid, that's the main one I have a memory of. And I had this thing, I was like, that's right. I remember the first one a bit. I obviously remember that they go to the Wild West and everything like that. But I really thought number 3 all these years was the worst, known as the worst one, and that Back to the Future 2 was regarded as the best one. But I don't know. It's not on the same quality as 1 or 3, as far as I'm concerned. It's not as funny. I don't like obviously we're not meant to like the whole future timeline where Biff is this like, you know,
He's Donald Trump, essentially.
Donald Trump, basically. It doesn't feel pleasant watching that for like 20 minutes, half an hour. Like it feels grotty watching it. It's not like the first film has like a jolly vibe to it, and like you're enjoying watching it. 3 has such a jolly vibe, and it's like it's super lighthearted. 2's pretty dark when it gets to that future timeline for 20 minutes, and it's disturbing to watch. I don't know, the whole future thing. It's kind of funny now to look back and be more in the future than that is set in, but it's just like the way Biff acts in number 2, I think is very over the top and ridiculous, as opposed to, I think he's the best in number 3. Like I think his best portrayal is in number 3, where he doesn't feel like such a character. He feels real in that world, if you know what I mean. In number 2, I just feel like it's very over the top, and I don't think as much as the humor hits as what I thought, and which very surprised me because I always thought 2 was regarded as the best, but it's obviously not. So
to your point, like this is a lot of, because this was my video store film. Every week we'd go to the video store and I would rent Back to the Future 2 specifically. So I've seen this movie over 50 times, probably like over 100 times, like many, many more times than number 1, but I don't think it's better. But I think, you know, I agree with a lot of what you're saying in terms of the future does feel horrible in number 2, and it is a really dark film. Like he tries to kill Marty. It's kind of nuts.
That's the thing. Like all my memory though is of number 2, like the sports almanac. Like that thing is like ingrained in my head. The tunnel chase, like it's the hoverboard. It's all is as soon as what I picture when I picture of Back to the Future. What were you going to say, Grana?
I was just going to say, like, are you guys talking about the present, the new present that he goes back to that you hate, or is it the future that you hate?
The new present, yeah.
The new present. Sorry, my bad.
Because I was going to say, like, I think it is fun watching the future in this one and seeing how not like the future it is. But I actually think that works in its favor. Like, you can make a movie and try and have a really realistic future, but people watching it in generations to come are going to look at that and say, "Oh, well, he was close here, but it was really off here and here and here." But if you do this really over the top future like he does, like it's just fun to watch. Like anybody who's watching that and is like, "Oh, this isn't anything like the future we live in," is missing the point entirely, right? Like it's just a really fun world to explore. It just happens to be set in a timeline that we've lived through, right?
Yeah, I mean the fashion's the most notable example. Like, why would anyone wear pockets? It's dumb. And
Why would
Jaws,
anyone wear a green colander on their head? Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
What's actually funny is that the new present day number 2 is probably actually most like 2021. Like it's actually pretty. It's the most accurate of all the timelines of what's actually happening in today's world. So
Yeah, there's some startling similarities. And in some of my half-assed research, I found things where it's people are talking about it. Oh, they originally wanted to make Back to the Future 2. This was the film they always wanted. They wanted to be futurists. They were always trying to predict what the future would look like. I don't think that's true though in any way. Like I don't think anything supports that theory. Because you're right, the future seems very silly, and I think they were having a bit of fun. Like they were trying to predict some things where they're almost like not flying it, but like they were just trying to look at things where automation's gone and I know kind of like the cyclical nature of some stuff. But I don't think they were like, here's what's actually going to happen in 30 years' time.
No, I
And even
agree.
and to the point where it's like the almanac, where it's like, oh, this has a dust jacket. This is before they created dust-proof paper. Like, it's such a great throwaway line, but it's just so stupid.
Yeah,
But then
it's real
also
silly.
like they played at that joke of the Texaco gas station that was there in the 50s, it's big in the 80s, and in 2015, it's entirely automated now. It's like, oh, look how the world is changing. We used to have 5 guys come and pump your gas for you. Now it's just a robot that does it all for you. It's like
In
that's
1985, it's one guy, and now it's no guys.
Exactly. So I think you're right. It's dated really well, being like such a and just the quote is like, too bad the weather surfer the post office isn't as good as the weather service. It's like
Yeah,
that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Grana,
it's real
Grana,
something.
what's your take?
Yeah, I thought I was going to disagree with Luke again, but no, I agree. I think
Wow.
two is the weakest film. Like, I like it. Like, I think it's a lot of fun, and I will agree. Like, the future scenes are the things I think of when I think of Back to the Future, because they're so far out and so weird and fun. Obviously not realistic at all. But I think too, the plot is kind of a mess. Like, it's an incredibly chaotic movie compared to 1 and 3. Like, one is it's a really tight story, I think, of a really interesting concept. Number two, I think, just tries to push it too far, and it just gets really chaotic and strange. I think especially watching these movies back to back, like, you watch too much of number one in number two. Like, there's a good, I
Yeah.
don't know, throughout the movie, there's a good 20 minutes where you're just watching scenes from the first movie that I just finished like 2 hours ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a common complaint. I don't share it, but continue.
And I think the whole conceit of the film of taking Marty to the future to prevent his kids from going to jail, like, I think the whole first movie is like, you can't tell me anything, you can't change, we don't want to change what's happening in the future. And then in the second one, just let's turn that on its head. Let's go to the future to stop your kids going to jail. Like, why can't he just warn him in 1985 to not let his kid, like, you know what I mean? Like, don't get in this
Like,
car accident. There's just lots of ways around that, and I think it's a really weak reason to even travel to the future.
why can't he just stop his kid from
Yeah.
going to jail? Like, walk in there and knock him out, or
And be a good father.
just kill Biff, man. Just get rid of Biff. Or
No, you're missing the point. There's always a Biff. There's always a Tannen who's gonna bully people like the McFlys. All right.
yep.
Yeah.
It's like Bioshock Infinite, man. It's lighthouses and
Yeah, a girl. Yeah.
there's always constants. Look, all right. To that point, I can see why you think that. Like the first one, obviously they filmed that scene where Doc drives up. He's got a new souped up model. He's in a ridiculous outfit. He's like, it's your kids.
Yep.
They never planned for a sequel. It was just a nice little joke to be like, oh, there could be Zemeckis and Gale. They never actually thought or like planned out this trilogy.
Yep.
They just were like, that'd be fun to be a thing. And so then obviously when they get the green light to make two more, they're like, okay, well, we've got to do that. And yeah, if the second one is the worst, then it does kind of, they wrote themselves into a corner a bit.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It cracks me up that it takes place right after the end of the first one, and they've aged like 5 years, and the actress is different for Jennifer. Like, and it's just like, whoa! And Marty's now like, Michael J. Fox is now like 28, still playing the 17-year-old.
Yeah.
It's just,
I still think he's doing a great job.
Oh yeah, he pulls it off.
He is.
But
He's an eternal 17-year-old.
yeah,
But yeah, it was really sad. What Claudia Wells obviously had to take care of her mother, so
Yeah.
couldn't reprise her role, which sucks because she's a much better actress than what's her name? Someone Shue.
Jennifer.
Elizabeth Shue.
Elizabeth Shue, who comes back in The Boys every
Yeah, I
day,
know.
which I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
That just made me feel very weird about it.
Yeah.
Do you know much about the whole situation with the actor that played the father?
I know everything about every situation in this film. What would you like to know?
No, like I read up on it because I was like, why is he upside down? And I was like, I feel like they've recast him, and I didn't know the reason. And then obviously he doesn't show up in the third, or it's always like he's off in the distance. He doesn't talk or act or anything like that.
Well,
And
he shows up in the
sued-
third in one scene, and you can see him in the background. It's like, man, he's clearly not Crispin Glover.
Yeah. And like he sued them and won because they tried to pretend it was him and intercut it with old scenes of him.
Yeah, well, they used footage of him that he didn't give permission to, and it's like Crispin Glover sounds like a bit of a tool.
So it was an argument about money, but he said it was about the script, like it was about the ending or something, and that they changed it, or it's a weird case.
Yeah. So the story goes on the set of this, Crispin Glover seeing himself as a method actor and a bit of like a high and mighty, was very difficult to work with. So there's a story that in one scene when him and Marty are talking about the plan, he just starts sweeping randomly. Like he's not sweeping anything. He's got a broom and he's sweeping. And Zemeckis pulls him aside. He's like, "Hey, what are you doing, Crispin?" He's like, "I'm sweeping away my indignation." And it's like, this is the sort of stuff that he pulls out this bizarro stuff, just randomly starts doing his own things, trying to like unpack this character in a way that nobody sort of wants or needs. But he just seems intent to be like, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be a big thing. And so it got to a point where they ended up just firing, not bringing him back for the second one because they didn't want to work with him. And then he gets into all this issue where I don't know why they didn't just recast him. They recast Jennifer. They could
Yeah,
have
they
just
should have.
recast him. But I guess because Crispin Glover, I don't know. What do you guys think of his performance in the first one?
I'm not even joking. My first note for the whole trilogy was the dad is so freaking annoying and cringe. Like the opening scene in the future where he's like a weasel straight away was annoying me so much. I was like, God, like this acting is cringe.
But that's all intentional, right?
Yeah, exactly. But that was literally my first note I wrote down as I rewatched this trilogy. But I don't know, it's nothing special.
But
That's
I think
funny.
even at the end when he's like the cool guy, like he's won. I don't think he's good in that scene either. Like he just
Really?
annoys me. Yeah, he annoys me.
It doesn't
Okay.
pull it off.
I mean, Crispin Glover has been annoying people since the beginning of his career, hence why he's had such a bad career. So I think it's just him as a person, to be honest. I like his acting in this. I think his performance as George is so unique and so iconic. And I don't know what it would look like with anybody else. Like I think it's one of those weird things where even though he's giving such a bizarre performance that I don't think anybody really wanted, it's ended up working in its favor because he's such a strange Weasley dude with these bizarre mannerisms. Like when he's laughing at the TV, he's like,
Yeah.
Like it's
Oh, it's
got like
great.
my favorite line where he says,
Last night, Darth Vader came down from planet Vulcan and told me that if I didn't take Lorraine out, that he'd melt my brain.
Yeah, well, let's just keep this brain melting stuff to ourselves, okay?
it's
Don't even melt my
hilarious.
brain.
And the way he says it just cracks me up. So like I don't mind him in the past when but just the future stuff like present day, sorry, is like I'm not a fan, but I don't mind George as a character as a whole. But
Fair enough. All right, I'm just going to jump in on my point and which one's the worst because we got off topic. Like I'm not going to argue either. I am refreshed in watching these where I'm like they're both in a lot of ways 2 and 3 are as good as each other. For the longest time I thought number 2 was much better than number 3, and it's got such a nostalgic place because like I said I watched it every second weekend. But I'm still going to say it's a better film. I think it I don't
what
know.
is?
Number 2. I think number 2's like that'll be my vote. You know, we can settle on 3 just for because I'm not gonna cast.
So wait,
Cast my
which do you think is worse? Do you think?
I think number 3 is worse. Isn't the right word. I think number 3 is not as good as number 2.
Wow.
I think number 3 it suffers a little bit from being such a different standalone adventure, whereas number 1 is a film about 85 and 55, and it's playing with like modern America and its timelines. And number 2 dips it into the future a bit, but then it goes back into the present and the past. But then number 3 is completely different. It's the West. So it's like an entirely different setting. So it feels like a very distinct film. It feels like more of a spin-off than a sequel. Whereas 1 and 2, 2 feels like a direct sequel to number 1. And I think that works. And it's got a really nice sort of cap off to like the first one is about Marty trying to fix his father. This one's about Marty trying to fix his son. It's this kind of idea of like, yeah, plays that cyclical nature of it. It caps it really nicely. I like that they go back and he's kind of like there's another him and he's back in 55 and he's sort of watching himself, and I think that's really fun. It's just a real sort of adventure.
It is fun, and it is a trope now. Like I have seen that done by a lot of other shows that dabble in time travel. Like they always end up going back to fix what they did the first time.
Yeah.
Like I could have been swayed probably, like to say 3 is the worst. Like I do think 2 is good, and I think they're pretty close. Like I do agree, but I do feel 2 is just slightly worse. It's just so messy.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I've never found it messy. I like its pacing in terms of because it has like you're right. It plays across 4 universes actually, like 4 timelines because there's 2 85s. I just find that really cool. It's like it ups what it did in the first one and it goes for broke.
I very much disagree with that. Like watching these again, I was so surprised how much I didn't enjoy 2. I enjoy it. Like, don't get me wrong. There's great stuff in it. I just feel like it's on a lower level than 1 and 3, and I really enjoyed watching them. Like, just enjoyed sitting there on the couch watching them way more than number 2.
How do you guys feel about him being called a chicken being like his Achilles heel?
I mean, it's classic. Like this, anytime I hear like, "Oh, you did this," and how dare you call me that? I'm not that. Like I think of Back to the Future, but it felt like I don't know. It feels like they're making it his thing as opposed
Yes.
to it being his thing.
Yeah.
Like it's all of a sudden just like, oh, this is my weakness, even though I'm not like a strong, confident character. Like it's like that's his thing. He's being egged on, and I don't know. Conan.
Yeah, because they do introduce it because again, they weren't going to introduce this thing that plays off in the first film, so they've got to. I think it's fun. Like I think it adds to the whole. He's got a bit of a he's a bit of a fragile man. Like again, Marty is not the coolest dude in school. He's got a girlfriend, he's got a band, and he's got his crazy old friend who he hangs out with. Like he's not hanging out with the jocks, but he's not a loser either. He's kind of like this weird in between of like he's cool, but he's not too cool.
Mm.
And so I kind of like the idea of him being like he's got a bit of a fragile ego because he prides himself on his music and he's not a particularly good musician. And Huey Lewis himself says he's too darn loud. So there's a sense of like Marty knows that he's not the coolest guy and he sees that he's going to become like his father if he can't sort of break out of this stuff. And so I really like the idea of like anything that attacks his ego, he just like breaks apart. He's like, no, I'm not a chicken. I could do it. I'm not going to be like my father. I think it's a really fitting, like thematic one.
Only thing I like about it is that it changes terms. Like I like that in the third one it's Yeller.
You yeller.
And I do like the ending where he doesn't get egged on at the traffic thing, which would have caused his accident. I do like how that comes around, but it feels forced when it comes in.
It just feels a bit egregious in the second one. I think like it gets used a lot, and it's not resolved until the third movie. But I feel like in the second movie, just every other person calls him a chicken, and that's the reason why anything happens in that movie.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Like just burn the damn almanac. Stop. Don't get egged into a challenge by Biff. Just eat it.
I'm just curious. What do you? Okay, like you say that you really don't enjoy watching 2. What do you enjoy about 3 so much more? Because I feel like people who enjoy 3 are generally the older people who like westerns a lot, or people who don't like drama because number 3 is very lighthearted in comparison.
It is.
See, 3, I think, is arguably the best. So
You're wrong, but
I didn't think that coming into it. I thought it was regarded as the worst, but I so enjoyed watching 3. It's jolly vibes. I think honestly, like Christopher Lloyd is fantastic, and this movie is. I feel like it's Doc's movie in number 3, and he's such a strong actor that it is fantastic. I think his relationship with I forget the character's name in number 3. Clara is like I think it's the strongest like relationship other than Doc and Marty, but I feel like it's the strongest thing that I enjoy their chemistry together. I love the little things about like that's what is it the ravine that would have been named after she would have flew off the cliff. Like I like that sort of stuff. It's just I like Biff in number 3. Like as in I think he's an interesting villain. He's fun to watch and not annoying like he is in number 2. It's just I don't know. It's a jolly movie. Like it gave me good vibes watching it. I love the photo being of the tombstone that is changing the name and like he's getting measured for the suit. There's just so much stuff in number 3 that cracks me up that I don't think it's the best. I think it's arguable. Like it's a close second to the first. But in my opinion, it's so much better than number 2. And I mean, Rotten Tomatoes agrees.
no one cares what Rotten Tomatoes.
66% to 80%.
I think it's close to being number 2 for the worst of the 3. Like I don't think it's a perfect movie. It is very sweet, but and very wholesome. And I was going to say I don't love the ending. Like it's really drawn out in the third one, and flying away on the hoverboard looks really stupid.
Yeah, that scene with Doc on there's not great.
Yeah.
Like the train's fun. I like the momentum it has. It's got a really good visual storytelling
Yeah.
element there. Like they've got to achieve this. That whole scene's fun.
That's great. Like trying to get to that speed and having the car in front of the train, like it's thrilling. It's thrilling to watch.
Yeah.
I love that. I love Marty at this point in the movie just being like, "Oh God, Jennifer, I hope she's all right." Like we haven't seen her since halfway through the second film, and now we're in the third film 5 years later, and he's like, "Oh God, she's still there. Oh my God."
Yeah, that is nice. I think you're right. Thomas F. Wilson probably gives the best performance in this, like of any Biff character. Like he loses himself. You can't tell it's him. He's so great.
Yep.
And it's got that great callback, obviously, to Fistful of Dollars, which
Oh,
Biff watches in the second one.
and that's the thing. Like, obviously, they watch the best movie of the Dollars trilogy in arguably the
It-
best of the Back to the Future one as well, which is
No,
great.
you said two's the worst. They watch it in two.
No, they're watching the first one, Fistful of
No.
Dollars. Yeah, because
Biff watches it.
because he's
Biff
getting
watches it in the
in the
second one.
metal thing, which is in the first movie, Fistful of Dollars.
No, yeah, but they watched that in Back to the Future 2, which you were
Yeah.
saying is the worst.
Yeah,
But they reference it
they
in 3,
reference
which he
it in
thinks is the
3,
best
which
somehow.
is what I'm saying. Semantics. Anyway, like I think the whole thing of Doc is going to get shot in the back, like by Biff, is great, and it's entertaining to watch. And he's trying to avoid this and little things that happen, and you're like, oh great, now this is going to cause. And when they're at the dance, and it's like, it's great.
It's a much better reason to time travel than your kids are going to be in trouble.
Your kids are going to jail, or
Yeah.
Doc's going to die.
You're forgetting it's clear. He says this one event starts a chain reaction that unravels all of your entire future generation's lives. So they don't just go to jail. Everyone falls apart. The whole McFly name,
So tell
which
him
we learn dates back to the Irish forebears in the 1800s,
where he's married to
is
his
all
mum.
undone. Yes, it's all undone. All right, it's all undone.
But if
Doesn't make any
he
sense.
just tells him in 1985, don't do X, it's solved. He doesn't need to go to the
Yeah.
future. He's going to get there
No,
eventually.
But imagine that, no, because what you're forgetting is then, what in 20 years later, so 2005, Marty's not going to be like, Doc told me not to tell my son not to do something. And my son's not going to listen to me. Your kid's not going to be like, okay, Dad, I won't do this one thing. He's like, screw you, I'm going to hang out with my cool guy friend.
The thing he needs
And
to
go
not
and-
do is get in a car accident, though. Like, that's the chain that starts this reaction, really. Like, if he doesn't
I
get in
mean,
the car accident, his future looks very different.
You can play this game all day. Though,
Yeah,
right?
he could.
Because he says, in number 2, he says clearly, he's like, this event, the robbing of the, whatever it is the event that unravels your kids' lives and the whole future generations. And so Marty McFly Jr. is not going to listen to his dad.
Well, if he just killed Biff in 1855 or whatever year it was.
We're not killing the Tannins, all right? We're not genociding an entire thing. You guys are taking us to dark places.
Conan, you might know this. You're the knowledgeable person on this series.
The resident expert.
When people
yes.
went and watched 2 in the cinema, did it have that trailer for number 3 at the end?
Yes, because these were filmed in back to back. So what happened
Yeah.
was the first one, I don't know if you remember, but at the end of the first one it says to be continued. Oh no, sorry, in the second one it says to be continued.
Yeah. And then it cuts to
Exactly.
the trailer
That's
for
to
the
the
trailer.
Actually, no,
Which spoils
actually-
everything.
Which spoils the whole movie. It's
Yeah.
so weird that it's just at the end of
does.
2. Like
Actually, no, sorry, no,
It-
I'm lying.
it literally shows him going back to the bench to get Jennifer. Like he greeting her again, like on the doorstep of the whole thing.
Yeah.
I'm actually not sure if that was shown at the end of the cinema because these were being made in tandem. So people knew that a third one was coming. I know they went back to the VHS of the first film and added in the there's like a to be continued that appears. And then they've since taken that off the DVDs, but that was added in. But I'm not sure about the cinema release.
I remember watching that trailer at the end of 2 when I was a kid. Like I vividly remember that. So I know
it was on that, yeah.
But
yeah,
yeah,
I'm not actually sure if that was in the cinema or not.
can we talk
Not
about
as far as I
how
thought.
Marty's like so close to banging his mum all the time?
These
No,
movies.
we'll get there on the no. It's in one film. We'll get there on the first one. Okay.
He's banging his mum in number 3 as well.
He's not banging his mum.
Well,
he's
banging
Michael J.
he's
Fox.
Irish.
actor and actress.
Michael J.
are.
Fox is banging Leah Thompson.
Yes.
that's completely
No,
different.
but in number 2, when he sees her in like Biff's, like in the new present day, he's
He
like
does not-
can't help. No, but he can't help but stare at her.
Because imagine if you just saw your mum and randomly she had giant fake
Yeah,
breasts.
but-
You'd
yeah,
be
but-
like,
Yeah,
What's
but
happened
he's
here?
acting like hubba.
no,
It's
no,
really
he's not. That
weird.
is such a misreading.
Oh
He's
man!
just like so shocked. He's like, why do you have giant fake tits?
And I don't know. My whole problem with number 2 is he's not subtle at all in that back seat in Biff's car. Like, there's no way Biff doesn't know he's in the back seat. He's just like there. He gets on the walkie-talkie and talking like 20
Oh, yeah.
centimeters away from
It's
Biff.
bad. It's real bad.
That whole scene is and like even when he's hiding and like all the guys are walking around the car throwing paint cans and stuff, it's like there's this giant body in the back. Everyone's sees it, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Look, I just want to read off some quotes really quick as to why Back to the Future 2 is so good. Oh, great, the Atrocity Channel. That's really funny. I don't know about you, but every time I tell someone to sit down, I'm like, take a seat. Sit down. That's still really funny. Doc Brown has a briefcase of emergency cash. And it's just different timelines of it. That's really funny.
Cool.
Biff plays 3 characters in that film. He plays Old Man Biff, he plays Griff, and he plays normal Biff.
And new present day Biff, like
I
Donald
guess
so
Trump
yeah.
they're
Biff.
technically two
Yeah,
different ones, aren't they? Yeah.
So almost 4 versions. That's crazy. And then the other great one is Pepsi Perfect, the natural progression of Pepsi from Pepsi Free and all that. That's really clever. All right, who's to blame then for
His dad
Oh, yeah?
has 2 ties on.
Yeah, 2
The fashion is wild in the second movie. It's just
that's
wild.
great.
And Elijah Wood's in number 2. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is kind of funny. All right, who's to blame then for? We'll say number 2 is the worst, just for lols.
Just to be correct.
I think number one wrote them into the corner of having to have their kids be in trouble in the future.
Yep.
Like that to me, if they had
Yeah.
a better conceit for him going to the future, I probably would think 3 is the worst film.
Yeah, that's fair.
He nailed it. It's done. Like they set themselves up. They have to continue right from there in the second one, and it's like, well, now let's write a movie based off that. And
I mean, I
instead
do,
of a
in
funny
a way,
gag at the end of the movie.
in a way, it almost made. I think the trilogy works so well as a trilogy because they didn't plan it, and it kind of feels like this. I don't know. 2 is, even if it's a bit of a mess, like it's a really fun mess, and it's into the future. And then the third one is just another great, like they go back further into the past. So I don't know if they planned out a 3 movie thing. I don't know what that would look like. Like I feel like it'd be very different and probably worse.
I feel like if they plan it, number 1 is a worse movie, right? Like number 1's got all these hooks that they're going to follow up in the following movies. I
That's
feel like
fair.
number 1's strength is it works so well on its own, and it's just so tight. There's no,
Yep.
yeah. If they leave a bunch of loose ends for them to follow up in sequels, it's a worse movie.
Yeah,
Like,
that's true.
The climax in number 1 is like iconic, you know. And I
It's a
mean,
masterpiece.
we
Like
see
the
it 7
climax.
more times over the trilogy, like of that car
You do
driving
see it a
through
lot,
there.
right? Yeah.
It's like, but it
That's
is
so
great
great,
the first
yeah.
time you watch it.
I think it's great every time you watch it.
And that's my favorite thing, and it's ongoing through the trilogy, but especially in the first and third one. I love that he's called Calvin Klein in the first one, and Clint Eastwood in the third
Yeah,
one.
good.
It cracks me up, and they're like,
Everybody everywhere will say Clint Eastwood is the biggest yellow belly in the West.
it cracks
Oh.
me up.
Yeah, I mean these films are full of it. Like they started on the first one. They had all these jokes when they were writing it. They're like, what if Marty invented skateboarding? What if he invented rock music? What if he did all these fun things?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a testament to them as like writing director team, which their careers go off the rail a little bit. Who deserved better then in number 2, or in general actually in the whole franchise? Who deserved better?
Yeah.
Griner, I'm looking
No,
at
I
you.
think you make a good point that like everybody remembers. I'm going to blank on everyone's names, but everyone remembers Doc and Marty, right? Like they have this great chemistry together. Michael J. Fox forever, immortalized through these movies. But Biff, like he's excellent in all of these movies. Like you said, the third one he really comes into his own and really like he should be in a western. He should be the bad guy in a western at some point. But
Straight up.
yeah, I
He
think
was.
he deserves more recognition, despite being like super rapey.
Super rapey, like just rapey, just rapist. It's not
Doesn't
even
need
rapey,
adjectives.
but
Yeah, I think it is a real tragedy that no one else in this film, not even no one else, no one in this film really went on to, or these films went on to have like big careers. This really stunted all of them, I think. Like Leah Thompson's gone on to be in a lot of smaller things, but she's never had she's never had any leading roles. She's always been either a really small role or like a mother figure. Christopher Lloyd, like we said, he's sort of gone on and done some smaller things, but he's never been. I don't know. He became the wild, crazy doctor from this.
Yeah, he did.
And even in films, he comes up as he plays the wild, crazy ex. Like in Nobody, he's a wild, crazy father. In there was a recent horror film, like what is it? I'm Not a Serial Killer, where he's like the crazy man in town. It's just that's who he is now, unfortunately. And Thomas F. Wilson did nothing.
but I'm just trying to look up what he did. I always thought he was this person from Lost, but he's not. So never mind.
Who did you think he was in Lost?
I thought he was John Locke's dad in it.
Oh no,
He always reminded me of Biff, so I don't know.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, but
Did you have an answer, Luke?
for who deserves better?
Yeah.
Don't know. Like I don't know. His uncle that has to better get used to those bars. He just goes to jail.
Uncle Joey.
I love that
It's a good
line.
joke.
And what's so funny is that line is like I heard that line when I was a kid. My dad says that line all the time, and I never knew it was from this until the most recent rewatch. And I was like, my dad says that all the time. Like, if there's a kid behind a child gate, he's like, better get used to those bars, kid. And I have never associated that it's from this movie. So
Your dad's funny.
yeah,
Your dad's a funny man. I love it in number 3 how they come back to that. He's like, "You're my great grandfather or whatever," and he peed on me.
yeah,
That's funny.
yeah.
I think my only vote would be, I don't even know if he deserves better. But Crispin Glover, like I talked about, he's a weird dude. I don't know. I think he's a competent actor, and I want to see him in more stuff. But I think he
He was
hard to work with by the
shot
sounds of
himself in
things.
the foot.
He was going to
Yeah.
be who I said, because it's obvious that it's not like it's noticeable that he's not there in number 2 and 3. Like,
Yeah, it is.
it's, and I think that plays into the whole thing that they had to write this whole thing why he's upside down, like he was in an accident, like it just because they don't want to show his face. It feels weird. So
I mean, it's really funny because he's just floating upside down all the time, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, he broke his back. Like that's. And Crispin Glover was also meant to be Seamus originally in the third one, and that would have been really funny to have Crispin Glover and Leah Thompson again as.
Yeah, it would have made more sense.
That would have made.
It feels
would have
weird
made, yeah,
having
more
Michael
sense.
J. Fox acting across from himself.
and as banging his mum, like
Pretty much.
Look, there's lots of. It also feels weird having him as his daughter and his son at the dining table, but it's a Michael J. Fox family.
it is.
Quick fix. What do we do?
I said my opinion anyway.
Yep.
Yeah, you
Just
change
got
the
to give
ending
him
of
a
the
better
first
reason
one.
to go back. And the whole plot needs to be tightened up. I think, like, it plays fast and loose with the rules of time travel.
Change the ending of the first one, and they don't write themselves into a corner, like Griner said earlier. I think that's the best way to do it.
All of my few notes were for number 3. So my quick fix is to make it a World War II drama instead of a Western.
No, it's so good as a Western.
Gee, that's dark though.
I know, it'd be great. They just coming off number 2, that's already a bit darker. Really chop and change it. It's like Strickland's like this drill sergeant, and Marty's got to go through like a Full Metal Jacket-esque training scene. Biff's a Nazi or something. That'd be great.
Oh,
That would be.
God, Biff's Hitler or something. Just picture Biff as Hitler. That's
Or they go back in time to the West, alter or something. They alter it, and then when they come back, Hitler is no longer Adolf Hitler, but Adolf Tannen.
Yeah.
How? Oh,
Biff Hitler.
Yep.
Yep.
He keeps the first name, changes his life. No. I don't know. I don't know. I'm just going to mention it here, but there's a deleted scene in Back to the Future 3 where Mad Dog shoots Marshall Strickland in the back. Did you guys watch any of the deleted scenes, or have you seen any of them?
No, that's messed up.
Yeah, it's really dark, and like that, you can tell they were like, we're not going for this tone in the film, but it's pretty funny because they mentioned that earlier on. That's like his motive, like he shoots people in the back, and so there's a scene as they're going into town where he just like they ride past and just shoots him in the back. And then he tells his son, he's like, "Remember these words, son, discipline," and that's kind of funny.
Yeah.
I
I
had
just
this
think it's
note for
funny.
number 3 that like they do the whole bar scene where he bullies where he bullies Marty in the bar, but it feels different when he's got a gun. Like it changes the dynamic a bit when he can shoot and kill you. Like,
Yeah, yeah, it does. Okay, I had here a whole section on deleted scenes, but I don't know if any of them are really worth mentioning.
Let's just get into the first one.
Well, no, because the first one's got a lot of deleted scenes we will mention because they're pretty interesting. Oh, the one thing I watched, so that's the only deleted scene from the third one. In number 2, there is a scene where you see, that crazy old man in number 2 who's trying to get money off Marty, and he says he's like, I wish I could go back and put some money on the Cubs.
Yeah.
So he's actually Terry, who was the mechanic from the first one who fixes his car. No, sorry, the mechanic in the second one who fixes his car. And so there's a deleted scene that explains that relationship, which again I never knew about.
cool.
Wait, you guys clearly don't care about the deleted scenes. This is
They're
It'd be
deleted
better if
for
I
a reason.
watched them.
they're not. They're deleted because
They're on the cutting floor.
people like you can't appreciate good filmmaking. Which film wins? It's an obvious answer.
It's number 1 unless you're Luke and you have a bad opinion.
I think it's number 1 as well, but 3 is so good in my opinion, and
But
I
it's
really
not even
enjoyed it.
close.
No,
But-
it's not.
No, one is so great. Like it's a great, like, perfect movie. Like the whole setup of like the introduction to Doc, him first like traveling, like going to the past, after the Libyans attack them, and shoot Doc. Like it's classic, and it's
Mm.
yeah,
That's the thing. Like what you said, it's a perfect film. I think this is honestly like this is a perfect movie. I can't think of any other film really that'd be like that's perfect or it's flawless. This is a film that I really do think has has no issues. It has no structural problems. Like universities teach this screenplay as what a perfect script should be.
Mm.
Like this movie is foundational.
Yeah, like even in my notes, like I started like even the opening scene, like it's such a slow burn. Like you go through this Rube Goldberg machine of him making breakfast, and then Marty like plugging in the amp and all this stuff, and then he just strums that note. And it just sets the tone for the whole movie. It's so good. Like it's such a slow burn,
Yeah.
and then this bang, and it's yeah, this movie's great. I mean,
Yeah.
Marty is like a total hornbag in this movie. Like between that and Biff
Yes.
being basically a rapist, like it's
Yeah,
interesting, but it's
that doesn't
great.
hold
They're
up.
really good.
All
Like
right,
it
so
does.
okay,
It's
all
not
right.
very.
Let's just get into that then, right? Because I don't think you can't use something aging as a reason why it's not it's saying that's not doesn't fly anymore, so that therefore it's bad. It's a film made in the 80s off the back of the Porkies, like the horny comedy thing. This is what the 80s were full of. Revenge of the Nerds, the most egregious example, a film that literally involves a rape scene, but that was played for laughs in the 80s. That was just how they viewed it, which isn't great. What if Biff in that film is in the 50s? Guess what happened in the 50s, guys? Women didn't have many rights.
Yeah,
This shit went on, and it was just like that's normal, that's life. It's like it's evil. It was horrible,
Yeah,
and this film never once plays it for a laugh. It never actually plays that scene as like ha ha ha. Look what Biff's doing. It goes really dark and somber, and like
yeah,
as soon as George enters it, the tone shifts, the music drops, it goes deathly tense and dreadful. And like even Biff's voice changes, and it's just like how serious he is. Like it's not handled lightly. It's not handled poorly. It's handled really tastefully. It's like this stuff happened in the 50s. It happens now, but in the 50s it was culturally accepted.
Luke's gonna
Like
say
I
there's no
don't.
tasteful way to handle rape. Is that what you're gonna say?
Well, there isn't, but I don't think it's done well or tastefully at all. Like, here's the whole thing. Obviously, he's a jerk. Biff's not a good guy. It's not like they glorify it or make it like a funny thing or anything like that. But the
Mhm.
fact that he is handsy feely like the whole movie. Then there's the scene in the car where he is basically raping. Like he's holding her down. He's kissing her. He's
He's assaulting her, yes.
yeah. And then this other guy who she's not really seeing at the moment pulls him out, punches him, and she's like, "Oh, my hero," and walks away with him. Like it's and she's like, "Now I'm interested in you." She should be traumatized. It's not like you can't say women back then it was culturally acceptable and she was like, "Well, shit, I'm getting raped." It's not like it's not how it is. And it's just brushed aside as like the hero saved the day. Now she's with him and it feels cheap and it feels like it's just like a damsel in distress and that's his reward. He knocked out the bully, he gets the girl. And obviously it is an 80s movie. There's a reason the cliche exists is because it's from there. But it's not really tastefully done when that's the case. Like, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
I just yeah.
I think I can agree. Like I think the resolution isn't great. It's a very different movie though. If they call the police, she goes in for counselling. You know, like,
She's traumatized.
but
Like-
I get it. Yeah, it is kind of just like I'm the damsel in distress and he's my hero.
But I think you're overplaying as well. Like that didn't happen in the 50s. Stuff like this that did happen, and people didn't go, "Okay, we have to go to the police report." It went unsaid. Like
Yeah,
it was a cultural thing
I
of
get
oppression
that,
and
but
of hindrance.
I don't like that's the thing. I'm not saying like she'd go to the cops and the cops would be like, well, we need to investigate this. This is like they were assholes. But like yeah, she's it barely phases her. And like, I don't know, there's the whole weird scene with the ginger kid at the dance floor where he just pushes Marty
yeah.
aside and he's like, and starts like dancing with her really awkwardly and feeling her up. And it's not like, and she's just like, okay. And it's this like little nerdy
She's not.
ginger
She doesn't
kid.
say okay. She's trying to break. She's trying to get out of his grip.
Like it's this little Weasley ginger kid. I don't. It's like really weird to watch, and it's uncomfortable.
I think that's your own judgment of gingers, which is a bit problematic. But
no judgment at all. But like, it's just it's a weird scene where it's just like all the guys are rapey. Like Marty's a bit rapey for his mum. Like it's a bit.
Oh my gosh.
Very,
I'm just trying to
it's very
I'm just
horny,
trying to understand. So any character who shows like sexual interest in someone is rapey?
No,
how
but there's a
you're playing it?
lot of like, and I get it. It's the 50s. I get it that like the jock, the greasers, like did that. Like Grease is a movie where similar stuff, not to the degree of this, but it is more of that relationship. But it's definitely doesn't hold up in today's viewing, and it's
But
not tastefully done.
It's not a movie made today either. It's
No.
playing on two things. It's a movie made in 85, but it's also looking back at how things were in 1955.
Yeah,
Like,
which
I don't know.
which
Is
is
it-
I think-
fine, and that's why I don't think this movie should be cancelled or be looked at as a bad thing. But you can't say it's done tastefully when
I think it is, because I think you do a huge disservice to it if you try to then be like, look, guys, this is from the 80s point of view and we're preaching how bad this is. Because it's trying to depict it depicts the 50s truthfully as a problematic time. And like, I can't say this enough, like this stuff happened, and women in that time, again, maybe I'm clear, maybe I'm mansplaining or speaking with a complete lack of authority on it. But like the idea that she should be traumatized or come away from it and just be like, I need to go home and think, like, women repressed this stuff in the 50s. Were like, no, this is just what men do. Boys will be boys. And again, it's 70 years later and we are still reeling with that. So to say, in the 50s, like a film made in the 80s should have been a lot more tasteful and stuff. It's like, no, it's depicting a very accurate lens of what it would have been like in the 50s. It's staying true to the world of the film. And I think if they try to tweak that and be like, look, let's try to wash over this and make it seem better than it should have been, like make everything seem a bit more darker and everyone a bit more depressed by it, that actually does a disservice by trying to alter history. And what this does is it shows, hey, this horrible stuff happens,
and
but
I
people
know,
also just ignored it, and
like
people just moved on and were like, let's
this
continue
movie
life.
tries very much to not alter any history or anything. So
100%. Marty doesn't want to disappear, so he remains the same.
he's like, this rape must happen because it's not acceptable today in the
God.
80s, but it has to happen back then. Otherwise, it'll change the whole course of society for the better. No,
It's an
I
interesting
get it.
conversation to have, but I mean,
Did you guys watch it with your partners, like with your wives?
Yeah.
Did they
Yeah,
say any comment about that scene with Biff or anything?
No.
My wife didn't like it at all. Like it made
I don't
her
think
cringe.
anyone's supposed to like it.
But well, you're saying it's done tastefully, and she very much disagreed. She
Taste
talked about
doesn't
it as
mean
watching.
like-
She was like, "That's not great to watch, and it's not done well."
taste doesn't mean it's pleasant to watch, though. Like, it's supposed to be uncomfortable. It's supposed to be a bad guy doing a bad thing.
Yes, but it's more about her reaction. Like
Yeah, fair. I get what you're saying. I understand. How do you feel about Marty not, like, that's not him singing in the final scene, right?
No, they got someone else to dub it.
It's really obvious.
No, yeah, very very obvious.
I mean, look, he's not playing the guitar either, so he's holding it properly and he's doing some like slight,
Movements.
finger work that's real. But yeah, he's not a guitarist. He's not a singer. So
I'm not concerned by that. Like, that's pretty common in movies, but it's just very clearly not his voice.
I mean, they did it in the first High School Musical.
That's right. And it was a crime there too.
yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I don't have an issue with it. I'm not hankering to hear what Michael J. Fox sounds like singing Johnny Be Good.
Don't you want to hear that? I think it wouldn't be interesting.
It'd be fine, but
It wouldn't be interesting if he was a bad singer at the end of it, though. Like, he's trying to base everything on being this musician, and he's just really kind of average.
Yeah, I would have liked that.
that would go against a lot of what the film says, though. And what do you guys think of the ending? So a lot of flack came at it for sort of depicting monetary wealth as success in life, right? Like he comes back and George he's really rich. They got a really nice house, and it's like he's made it. He's got a good life now because he's wealthy. Like, I don't know. What do you guys think of that?
Wasn't that like Crispin Glover's whole thing? I think it was about that. Like he didn't like.
He had an issue with that he had an issue with everything, but that was one thing. Yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, it's not like a great message to send, but it's a message I believe because that's what most people today still associate with success. I would be happy if I could afford that thing. Like
You've also got 10 minutes of movie to display how different the future is and how successful his parents are. Isn't that the easiest way to do it? Like, do you want another half hour of movie where they have some really nice in-depth conversations about how much they love each other and how much that's all that they need? Like,
it'd be like, we're rich and famous. Biff washes our cars.
Yeah.
He's the bully. I punched him, and now I win.
Yeah.
Which is a good message for kids. If you get bullied, punch them.
Yeah.
If you see someone raping someone, punch them too. That's not a good thing in the 50s, 80s, or 20s.
I don't know I can't figure out if you're saying so kids shouldn't punch bullies, but they should punch rapists.
I said they should punch bullies. I said if you're getting bullied, punch them.
Punch
I
everyone.
thought you were being sarcastic.
And you'll be rich and successful. I agree with that. My son says he got pushed at school. I'm like, did you punch him?
The getting your parents together is a really, I don't know. I just thought that was a really, really fun concept. Like to base a movie around that, a time travel movie based around getting your parents to fall in love is just a really, like, yeah, this movie is just so good. Like the story is such an interesting concept, and I think they just really,
And
they do it. They make the movie that they set out to make.
that's what makes the first one so good. Like him trying not to have his mum fall in love with him.
It's so good.
She's just drawn to him. I do like that she kisses him and she's like, "That's weird. There's something not right about that."
Yeah.
Like I felt like I was kissing my brother or something. But yeah, like I like that whole thing of him trying to, and George is just failing miserably at him trying to set him up with his future wife.
Yeah,
so.
I quite enjoy when he sends George into the diner to talk to her, and he like the quote I had at the start, "You're my density." I mean, he's just so
Every time
awkward.
when he's like, "Give me a milk chocolate," and it just slides across. It's so. I think it's a really clever. It's also a really clever like inversion of the grandfather paradox, like we're talking about. Like instead of sort of that, did you go back and kill your grandfather? What happens to you? It's like, well, you have to go back and save your parents. I don't. It's a nice little play on that. I think.
I wonder if those sort of tropes were things people even thought about before these movies, though. Like, I guess I don't have the perspective on it, being a man in 2021, but like, how many of these sort of paradoxes did people think about before this? Or did this movie really introduce the grandfather paradox, or the fall in love with your mother paradox?
Well, I don't know because again, physicists have been around. Carl Sagan was active in like the 70s and stuff, so a lot of his writings I think would have been around.
Yeah,
So I assume some of those big ones would have already been out, right?
yeah, and things like Doctor Who were around before this as well, which is another big one that deals with weird time travel stuff, but it's a lot more wibbly wobbly than this movie. But I wonder if this introduced those sorts of paradoxes and concepts to a wider audience that we never had before this.
Yeah, to the mainstream, I think definitely. I think I have to mention Alvin Silvestri, like the music in this film,
So good.
both like the score and just like Huey Lewis in the first one just is great.
I'll just say,
it's so iconic.
It's funny that you say that about Carl Sagan because as soon as I saw Alan Silvestri, like I'm a soundtrack guy, like I love composers, like most of my phone's taken up with that sort of music. So as soon as I see his name, I associate it with Cosmos because he did the score for Cosmos.
There you go.
Which obviously is a Carl Sagan connection there as well. So yeah, but no, the score, like the main theme is iconic, and yeah.
I think I really love a movie that has a theme and uses it really well, and these movies are a great example of it. And like a lot of classic ones are like Indiana Jones that we've done, Star Wars. Just having a good theme and knowing when to use it and to bring it in just does so much for a movie, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's what's good about Lord of the Rings. It's got like 5 classic themes that play for each different things when a character shows up. But going back to number 1, Conan, like that ending scene, like the whole clock tower thing, the lightning strike, the car hitting it just in time. It's perfect. Like I love that scene so much, and it's so iconic, and just the 2 flame trails, and it's great.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, from the opening scene where he first does it, those flame trails go between their legs. Like, looking past the kind of dodgy effects on it, it's just so cool, and it's just so like. There's stories of like when they show the first test screenings of that, and the audience is watching initially, and they're kind of not sure what goes on, and then as soon as those flames hit, like it was just this tangible. Everyone's like, what am I watching? What just happened?
Yeah.
And like how it blew people's minds because like you can't do that in a film. And they thought, the dog was killed. Then he comes back and they're just like, all right, we're watching something unlike anything anyone's ever seen before. And I think it's crazy.
It cracks me up, all these simple people in the 80s. Like, what? What is going on?
Time travel, wasn't it?
No, I know. I get it, man.
You laugh, but it's kind of like I feel like we don't get those experiences anymore. Like everybody is so used to seeing anything and everything done with computer graphics now. Like there's nothing that can't be done in a movie. There's no restrictions on anything except for budget.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, that's the thing. Like moving away from the whole animation thing, I think the thing that stood out, Avengers Endgame was like the last moment I remember like it being like a big moment in the cinema, and that's just. It's not an easy thing to accomplish. Like you have like 19 movies to build up to like this moment. Catches like a hammer and like the crowd go nuts. Like no matter where you are, like it's such a cinema moment. And yeah, it used to be much easier, and things captured our imagination much more back then. But we're all
It's kind of
pretty.
gone back the other way. Like I feel like movies with practical effects are more impressive now. Like
Yeah.
Mad Max Fury Road, like that movie is just such a
Oh,
joy for me to watch, and it's
so
because of
good.
the practical
Yeah.
effects. And I think
Yep.
these movies are so much better because in a lot of ways, I think they are better because they did such good practical effects that there's obviously computer generated graphics and they look crap. I'm glad there's not more of them. Like I'm glad they went
Yeah.
like they
Yeah.
just did a really good job with the practical.
Yep.
Yeah. I think Mad Max is the best example. That was the last one that everybody was just kind of. I remember when I saw the movies, everyone was just kind of like gasping and silent because they're just like, "What am I watching? How are they doing
Mm.
this?" And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
you could have done that in a ultra CGI fest, and it would have just been like, eh. But you're right,
Yep.
you can feel it looks different, it looks better, and yeah, it's a funny inversion.
Yeah.
And like, look what you're saying earlier about remaking this today, like this film in the '80s, like the reason why it made so much money, it was number one for 12 weeks at the box office. Which, like, I don't
Jeez.
think any film stays in the cinema for 12 weeks anymore. Films don't even go to cinemas now in 2021.
Mm.
And like, this is a film that people just went back and saw. Like, they'd see it once, and you'd be like, "What are you gonna do next weekend?" I'm probably gonna see Back to the Future a second time.
Yeah.
Like, it was just seeing the movies when this came out was just an entirely different experience. And like, I do think that really helped make it like the cultural juggernaut that it is. And
Yeah.
if you remade it nowadays, it just wouldn't be anything. It'd be like some people might go see it, like fans of the first one would see it, but nobody would really come at it and be like, "Yeah, it's a remake of an old film I didn't really see." It would really just kind of come in with a whimper, I think, and because you can't recreate that cultural impact of it.
No.
But I
you
mean,
can't.
who? I don't think there's anybody who saw the original movie who'd be like is hanging out for a remake. Like I'm definitely not.
No,
And even if they did make one, I think I would probably go see it, but I don't think it would never make any sequels, and so a studio's never
Like
going to pick it up
it,
anyway. Like,
I mean, I think it would do well enough for people to do it. I think it would be for today's generation who haven't watched it. Because I think this is a film that it's not like a Star Wars or a thing that people gravitate towards, like, like the MCU and all this, that younger fans pick up and get into these fandoms and everything like that. I don't feel like Back to the Future is one of those. I'm not sure why, but it's not one of those things that you see younger people be like, "Oh man, Back to the Future is awesome," like, and jump into that.
as Conan said though, it's such a movie of its time. Like, it really
Yeah.
explores the cultures in 1985, and then in 1955. You do that today, what does a TikTok influencer go back and do a Fortnite dance, and everyone in 1990 is like, "Whoa, that's so cool!"
that is
That's
literally what it would sort of be, right? Like,
Yeah,
would it be a TikToker or a YouTuber like goes back and is like, "I got to use the internet, guys." It's like, "Oh, cool, we've got dial up," and it'll just be this weird like, "Oh crap, what do I
What's
do?"
that
I have
noise?
yeah, and I'd be like, I have to call people I have to call people on my phone. What is that? And
Yeah.
it would be such a. I feel like it'd be so cringy. I don't know how you'd make that
yeah.
well.
Like,
Do
I
you
just
have
imagine getting
instant
up there,
messenger?
doing a TikTok dance, and everyone's like, "Oh, your kids are gonna love it." It's like,
Just
oh,
flashing. Oh,
That'd be
it's
so cringe.
it's so bad.
I think I'd kick my TV.
Yep.
Did you guys ever find out how Doc and Marty were friends? Or did you ever wonder why they were friends?
Doc went back in time, and he left Marty a note in third grade that said, "Would you be my friend?" And circle yes or no.
Yes, definitely. Please.
When an old man pulls up in a car, like, hop in. It'll be all right.
You don't say no.
Don't say no.
Oh.
Just don't say no. That's the lesson I learned from Biff.
So, in an original version of the script, like Marty comments how this old man put a note in his paper. He's like, "I've got a garage needs cleaning. I'll give you free beers." And so Marty just did that. He went and got paid and drank some beers with this dude.
Boom.
And I don't know. I think
Great
that's kind of
friendship.
nice.
I
Great
always took
friendship.
it
I
as
think.
the amp at the start, like he was really into
Mm.
that sort of stuff that he had.
Yeah, I think that was a big part. Like he was, because you see it again in the, we see it in the first one, how like he's this outcast of the town. He's like the crazy scientist who's burned down his family's mansion. He lives to get his insurance money. It's like he's kind of this misfit and outcast that nobody likes. And I think it really fits like as a kid. And like I said before, Marty's kind of an outcast. Like he's cool, but he's not really cool. And he doesn't really have any friends. He has a girlfriend. I can see why this guy, he doesn't fit in at home. He doesn't fit in at school. He's like, yeah, there's this kooky old dude up on the road with technology, and he's going to give me beer. Like, win, 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 win.
I'm all in on that.
Do you guys also know about the Eric Stoltz thing?
No.
I'm just going to touch on that really quickly because every other piece of trivia has talked about that. But Eric Stoltz, they filmed it for 5 weeks with him, and then they had to recast him as Michael
I
J.
did hear
Fox.
this actually.
That's crazy. And there's some footage of him like the original cuts, and he looks so strange. It's really interesting to watch because he just looks like such a different thing. And it's like this film could have gone wrong in so many ways.
Yep.
Yeah.
But and like if they had made it with Eric Stoltz, it would have just been a really ordinary film.
Yeah.
And like original versions of this film as well had the time machine was originally going to be like at one point they were driving into a nuclear blast, and then even earlier than that, it was a fridge that they set up in a nuclear blast, which they obviously come back to with Indiana Jones 4. They do end up like Spielberg uses that piece.
Yeah.
But there's all these weird things where it's like that would have just been so strange and so
It wouldn't be iconic.
no. Like, but they had to make all these pragmatic choices. Like, well, we can't afford to go out in the desert, so we'll film in the backlot of Universal.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're just going to film in 4 streets, and it just creates this great sort of sense of place.
And you're infamously a Spielberg detractor. How do you feel about his touch on these films?
Like, Spielberg he's undeniable as like an influence, right? Like he shaped Hollywood in a lot of ways, and I think like this film got made because of him. Like he had a lot of pull, and he was friends with Zemeckis and Gay were friends with him, and he was pretty much like he read the script. He's like, I love it. I want to get it made. But they'd had a bunch of sort of dud films, but he was just like, no, this film's got to be made, and it was the first film made under Spielberg's production company. And so he recognized talent. He was like, there's a bit of nepotism in there, sure, but that's fine. He was like, this script's great. You've got to make it. He ends up putting himself on the line, makes it, and it becomes huge. Like he has an eye for talent. I can't deny that. But Spielberg's also made some crappy movies.
I think he's definitely made some overrated movies, but he's made some good ones too.
He has, like without a doubt. Okay. I don't really know if there's much else to say. Should this film have won some Oscars?
I mean, we need to stop putting stock in the Oscars, I think. They don't stand for the people. There are capitalist overlords that we need to overthrow.
Wow. All right.
Pretty dark.
They're Biff Tannen in his Tower of Academy Greed.
The Oscars are Biff Tannen?
Yep.
That's a controversial opinion.
A little bit rapey. I mean, if you look at the history of who's been on the Oscars. Anyway.
Yeah, that's pretty true.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to put a disclaimer in the front of this podcast. A lot of discussion of assault.
Trigger warning.
Yeah. Luke, I think you're up next. What are we watching?
So, I figured we would get into another long trilogy. This wasn't long, but I don't know. We're going to watch The Hobbit. This was originally my idea to be like, haha, you guys have to watch The Hobbit, not realizing I have to watch The Hobbit too as well. I think it'll be an interesting trilogy to discuss. So obviously I'm the Lord of the Rings Tolkien fanboy. Was so hyped for these movies, was so brokenhearted over these movies, but there's a lot of interesting behind the scenes stuff to talk about these movies and what went wrong and why it went wrong. And like from Guillermo del Toro's involvement up until 12 weeks from shooting it, changing director and changing the whole script. There's a lot of interesting stuff to get into. So I'm sorry, boys, but we're going to be doing the Hobbit trilogy next.
I really hate these movies.
So wait, Luke, do you like them at all, or
not really? Like there's parts in it I like. There's definitely parts in it and performances I like. We'll get into that next time. But overall, these really broke my heart. Like
I'm going to break it further next week. I'm going to make you cry.
Okay, good.
These movies make me retroactively dislike Lord of the Rings.
Don't compare them. They're not involved with each other.
They should be.
Oh God, they try to.
That's bad.
But yeah, we'll get into that next time.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us here on The Good, the Bad, and the Worst. Like and share us on all the socials and plug us on all the podcast apps. You know, tell your friends. Go back in time and tell your grandfather or your parents.
It's make like a tree and leave.
Yes, it is.
Sound like a damn fool when you say it wrong.